Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is Marwa Neg from the Executive Education School of Business. Today, we will have our webinar about brands after COVID-19. First of all, let me introduce our guest speaker for today, Mr. Omar Hikal. Mr. Hikal is the CEO of the brand company. He's an entrepreneur and business strategy professional with 30 years of experience across a wide range of industries. His passion is to help companies solve strategic puzzles and to create strong brands that build value. Mr. Hikal has previously held leadership position with Mansour Group on the Philip Morris and Metro Markets businesses. Before we start the session, and I leave the mic to Mr. Hikal, let me remind you of some rules and regulations for our webinar. All microphones are muted. Please do not open or share your camera or start a video. If you have any question during the session, please write it down in the chat box to the right, and I will gather all your questions, and Mr. Hikal will answer them at the end. During the last 15 minutes, if you have a question, please either write it in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will unmute you so you can ask your question directly. That's all. Thank you very much. Mr. Hikal, please take the mic.
Great, thank you very much. أولاً مساء الخير، كل سنة طيبين ورمضان كريم. It's a pleasure to be here. I definitely want to start with just a few quick thank yous. Mayi, Yasmin, and Marwa for all the hard work that you've done in setting this up. My good friend Mohammed Kaseba and Mohammed Abdel Salam from the School of Business, of course, and Dr. Gheda Houedi, my dear friend, who has allowed me to speak to all of you today. And thank you to all of you for spending some time with us during your Ramadan days to talk about marketing. So this is the schedule of the webinars that have taken place. There's one more, Dr. George Sam'an on the 14th of May. I urge you all to register for that one as well. And let's get started. So what's happening in our world these days really made me think of this Steve Jobs quote, which is that sometimes life is going to hit you in the head with a brick. And that's kind of how it feels for many of us. But the good news is that, don't lose faith was the rest of that quote. So there's obviously a way out, a light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. And we're going to talk about that today and see how, as business leaders and people who are responsible for different brands and different contexts, how we can help you to do that. So we are living in a kind of a period of era transition where we are really transitioning from one era to the next and then to the next. You hear people saying this is a once in a century event. So we're kind of transitioning from what I call the BC era, which was before Corona or COVID. And that ended for all intents and purposes around the 12th, sometime in mid-February. We saw markets starting to react. We saw things starting to change significantly for many of us in our lives and our businesses around the world. And then we entered the DC era, the during Corona era, if you will. And that's kind of where we are now. We don't know how long it will last or when it will end, but we know that there's a lot of changes that are happening to our lives and to our businesses every day. And we'll talk a bit about what characterizes the DC era in a moment. And then finally, we have the PC era, which I'm calling PC because it's the post-Corona era. And I like the use of PC because it's been used before to mean politically correct. And a dear friend of mine pointed out to me that, now people who didn't want to accept political correctness will have to accept PC as the post-Corona era. So it's kind of a sweet irony there. So this particular period right now is really characterized by VUCA, right? And everyone, or many of you have heard this acronym before, and it really describes well what we're going through. Okay, we're seeing volatility, which means things are up and down a lot. Some days are good, some days are bad. We're seeing volatility on the markets. We're seeing volatility in our lives. And we're seeing a lot of uncertainty, obviously. And we'll talk a bit about that later, is that we don't really know a lot of things that we should be knowing as business leaders. And there's complexity. The complexity of a lot of people are saying, this virus will behave the way it wants to behave, irrespective of what we do about it. And that's quite a complex set of variables for us to try to manage in this context. And then finally, the ambiguity of really not knowing and not understanding all the different parameters, the unknown unknowns, if you will, of this crisis. So there's a lot of VUCA happening right now, and it really takes a certain type of leadership and a certain type of thinking to get through this. So what is the DC era characterized by? What's happening right now in our lives, in our businesses? First of all, we are truly under existential threat, right? And some countries are feeling it more than others, some industries more than others. But this is a crisis that will end many businesses and indeed many lives. There is a fatality, element to this. So everybody feels that they're under existential threat, and it really takes us to a different place mentally when we're in that place. We move into survival mode, and when we're in that survival mode, we're not really making our best decisions, are we? Right? We're kind of moving down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and moving down in levels of consciousness. And we start to think, with our reptile brains, we start to think fight or flight. And we aren't necessarily making a lot of decisions the way that they should be made, right? And that applies to us and our customers and many of the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, okay? I'm sure that many of you who are marketers have heard this, right? Marketing is a discretionary expenditure. I tend to disagree. I think that, if we can resist this, if we can afford, this is a time to make our voice heard as brands, right? Make your voice heard. So cutting marketing should not be the first thing that you do, but it definitely should, be something that you should do if you are at risk of losing people or, missing out on payments that you need to make or are under certain pressure. But if not, the default should not be to cut that, right? And there's a need for comfort. Everybody, our employees need comfort. Our customers need comfort. Everyone is looking for something that will comfort them, whether it's a show on television or an interesting article to read or food. A lot of us are going for food. There's this need for comfort that we're feeling right now. Okay. And this is part of that VUCA again, is that many of us as business leaders, we're in the prediction business, right? We tell our clients or our bosses or our board, if we do this, that will happen, right? If we invest here, we will get this return. And right now there's a very, I was listening earlier to a webinar that Dr. Muhammad Al-Arian was speaking, and he said, he doesn't know anything, right? He literally doesn't know what's happening, in markets or with the virus or with the situation. So if he doesn't know, then I'm sure that many of us are feeling the same way. And our lack of ability to assign, any probability to any particular outcome is really unsettling for us right now. So I think we need to just kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? This is going to be something that's going to be with us for a while. We're going to have to kind of push through it, but it's not going to be, a comfortable time for many of us for a while. But there may be a silver lining, right? In crisis comes opportunity a lot of times, and I learned recently that the actual word for crisis in Chinese is made up of two characters. The first character is danger, and the second character is opportunity. And I did a bit of research, and it actually is it was confirmed to me by the Chinese speaker that that's the way the word is made up. And I found that to be, quite interesting, is that their word means basically danger and opportunity coming together. But as you know, Reid Hoffman said recently, sometimes it just sucks, right? Sometimes it's just bad news. And we're gonna have a bit of a poll. We'll do a poll in a bit where we see kind of where everyone stands. But for some businesses and for some people, this is just a really bad and a tough time. And you know, it might be more difficult for some than others to kind of push through this, right? So what impact is the crisis having on us? Well, let's do that poll. Let's see kind of, you know, what impact is the crisis having on each of us? And I saw this recently. I love this quote is you know, we're not in the same boat, although we may be in the same storm. And it's so true on the personal level, on the business level, on the human level, on the enterprise level. You know, we're all in this storm together, although we're all in very different boats. So let's do a quick poll, if you guys don't mind. You know, I've kind of set 5 categories of impact in terms of where your business is right now. And if May, if you could launch that poll. So if each of you could just tell us, you know, where is your business right now? Are you growing? Is this a situation where your business is actually growing? Is it stable? Are you down about 20%? Are you down up to 60%, somewhere between 20 and 60? Or are you actually down in revenues more than 60%? So pick kind of which one of these categories you feel, which one of these boats, if you will, you feel that your business is in. And we'll kind of take a look and see where everyone is landing. I think you have about a minute to do the poll. Let us know where you are. Are you on that, you know, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good area, or are you in the ouch area? Are you stable? And I have the 20% where it says testing our operational leadership abilities. I think every one of those is actually testing those, but that 20% is really just kind of, there's a lot of decisions to be made, because if you manage it well, you can actually turn things around. Mike, can you see the results of the poll? If once we're at about 100 responses, you can go ahead and share it, or if.
Yeah, okay, we're beyond 100. We're 147.
Oh, great.
I'm sharing results now.
We have some real Zoom experts here. Okay. All right. So this is, you know, there's some good news. We've got, you know, 2/3, what's that? Almost 70, you know, 7% are between mildly affected to growth. So that's a really, I think, a very good number. We have 10% who are really in that catastrophic, life-changing red zone, which I completely understand, and we feel for you guys. I know that it's a tough time. And then we have 12% in that ouch, you know, hurting pretty bad, 60% down zone. And maybe what we talk about today can help you guys. So what we're seeing is that there are certain industries that are being impacted in different ways, right? So, you know, what are the kind of the parameters that impact, right? So we have government restrictions over here on the right that's affecting travel and tourism and hotels and, you know, automotive and retail trade, all of these industries that are really impacted by government restrictions, okay? And then we have on the left-hand side, things that you can do in isolation are doing really well these days, right? You know, Netflix, pretty good business model to be in right now, where you can just kind of sit at home and not touch anybody and watch and be entertained, right? Anything with large crowds, not doing well. Things that are essential are doing better than things that are non-essential, okay? And that's clear, you know, it's in the food industry. You're seeing a lot of food manufacturers doing really, really well, while obviously restaurants that do delivery are doing a little bit better than expected, but still not as well as the manufacturers. Whether you're offline or online, right? That's going to make a difference in terms of your channel strategy. You know, if you can shift, you know, from an offline, large crowds, non-essential strategy over to the left-hand side, then you're obviously going to do better, right? low physical contact versus high physical contact. It's very clear, right? So we can see kind of how that is impacting. So given that, what should brands be doing now? Right? What should brands be doing, or what should they not be doing? Right. So this is some research that I saw by Edelman, and they said, they polled people, and 89% of the people they polled said they want consumer brands to really be focusing on doing and producing things that help people meet the challenges that are being presented by the pandemic. Okay. And they want people to offer free or discounted products to healthcare workers and vulnerable groups, right? People that are unemployed. So there's a massive desire by consumers to see brands doing good, right? And this is a really important thing because brands have become today's philosophers in many respects, right? I mean, everybody knows, some of the inspirational messages that we hear from Nike or Apple or Adidas or any of these other brands, more than they know, any philosophers or thinkers and so on. So we get a lot of messaging, a lot of inspiration from brands, and people now are expecting brands to step up. Okay. More than half of people are only considering new products if they address something related to the virus. Okay. So this is very clear. And this was probably about a month ago. And I know that now things seem to be waning, but I can guarantee you that, as things progress, we're going to see people, going back and forth between, oh my God, things are horrible, to, oh, the future is bright, tomorrow's going to be great. There's going to be a bit of this back and forth. That's that utility. Okay. A third of people that were polled have already punished brands that did not respond well to the crisis. Okay. Not only have they stopped buying from them, but they have actually convinced others to stop buying from brands that was not acting appropriately. Okay. So this is really, this is common sense, but if you're responsible for a brand's, not just communication, by the way, this isn't about communication only, but if you're responsible for a brand's behavior, just do the right thing, right? That's kind of the basic message of this whole hour is just, if you do the right thing, if you get caught doing the right thing, it's the best thing for your brand. And we'll show you some examples of that. So first thing is play an active role. We saw a brand like Louis Vuitton, and obviously we can have a long discussion about, the merits of luxury brands in the world and the future of them and so on. But what did they do? They started producing hand sanitizer, right? And they did this within the first 2 weeks or so of the crisis. So they acted quickly, decisively, and they did something that was active to solve the problem. Solve, don't sell, right? Don't get caught trying to sell something right now. Okay. The best thing you can do is solve a problem, and eventually, and hopefully, this will impact your brand on the long run. And even if it does it, you've done something good, right? So just keep that in mind. I think this is an important time for us to communicate with humanity, right? Both inside your companies and to your consumers. I think it's really interesting, and I know that the business school has asked me to use this this virtual background and all of you to turn off your videos. Although I love the idea that now on Zoom, I'm seeing into people's living rooms. They're seeing into my living rooms. They're seeing my kids or my pets. And all of a sudden we're very human together. We're vulnerable. And there's a certain beauty to that I think needs to be kind of taken through into our brand communication and our brand experience. And this is important, but be light, but don't make light, right? So people want levity. We want something to make us laugh. We know that, every now and then we get something on our WhatsApp that just kind of makes our day. But we don't want to make light of the situation. There's too much real suffering, I think, that's happening in parts of the world and parts of our region and the country, that we don't want to make light of anything, but we do want to be light, right? I think in many respects, it's really something that we like to use. And I put Charlie Chaplin's picture because he was such a master of using humor to get through crisis and tragedy. And this is really important. And I know that it's, each of you needs to kind of think of how this applies to yourselves, but do or say something different right now, right? Put your manuals aside, put your guidelines aside, put all those restrictions about your brand aside, and just do something different. Do something unexpected, not only different from others, but different from what you would normally do. Right? I think that's a really important point. If you can take this opportunity to say or do something different, it will create a big impact. All right. So let's look at some quick examples. So this is a quick video that I'm going to show from IKEA in Spain. One moment. Let me.
Yo soy tu hogar. Voy a estar para ti, aguantando todo lo que venga.
Can everyone hear the audio?
There is no audio now, Omar.
It's a bit slow.
Is it choppy?
Yes.
Okay, we can skip the video. If the video is going to be choppy, then we'll just skip it. We're putting heavy demands on our bandwidth today. So IKEA ran a very nice campaign looking at life from the perspective of the home, and it was actually really well done, and it's very relevant, right? If people begin to rearrange their homes right now and to do things around the house, eventually they might make a trip to IKEA and buy something as well. So there's a double benefit there. But just the idea of giving people an inspirational message about their homes and about time spent at home, I think was a nice approach. This is a campaign that actually we did for one of our clients at the very beginning of the crisis. And we said, we just want people to know that you're here, people to know that you care, and to send a message of positivity to people during this crisis. And the message was very simple. Every person matters. Let's stay home together. I think it was an important move for a brand to just be out there and say something relevant without trying to actually sell anything. Okay, this is a great example from Mucinex. They just wanted to spread positivity, so they told everyone, spread facts, not fear. And it was a very simple message, very positive, telling people to help in spreading positivity, or spreading facts, not spreading fear tactics, which we saw a lot of that happening at the very beginning of the crisis. So this is an interesting campaign we did for one of our clients as well. Ahram is a company that makes most of the locks that you buy on your doors in Egypt. So الكوالين كلها الإقفال الأكر, they're a big company. They're 75 years old. They're a big part of their community. And we wanted to do something for them that really helped the people that could not make a living working from home. So those of us that can stay home, spend time on Zoom, and still make some kind of a living, we're very fortunate. But there are so many people that can't do that. فالكامبين اللي عملناه, it was basically saying لكل باب لو بيبان الدنيا قفلت أهرام هتفتح باب قصادها. وباب رزق was the campaign that we did that actually it promoted carpenters to make videos at home showing people how to do something, how to install a lock or fix a hinge, أو يعملوا حاجة في البيت, and to post the video. And for every like the video was getting, Ahram would send money to the person that posted. It was a great opportunity for them to just say thank you and help people actually make a living during these tough times, which we thought was a very important message. Okay, so we saw Heinz, in the UK, doing the Heinz to home boxes for people that couldn't shop in supermarkets for whatever reasons. They would deliver a lot of the products at home. Pret a Manger did a nice tribute to the NHS workers. Again, these are just ways of brands to say we're here, we understand what's going on, we're helpful, and it helps people remember obviously these brands later on. So this campaign we did for one of our clients as well, which was basically at the very beginning to get people together virtually. So it was a Facebook campaign, and it was all about getting different influencers and getting people to hold these different sessions with a very small number of people, and it was very intimate, where we had a musician or somebody that would do something and spend an hour or so with people, just kind of connecting everybody and doing that. So this is another campaign where there's a video. I'll try and show it. Hopefully it'll play, but McDonald's is an interesting example because McDonald's is an example where, you know, they did the campaign on the left, which was McDonald's Brazil, where they did the nice logo thing, but okay, fine. It's just a, you know, a branding exercise, showing that they can do that. But they also did other things. And one of the things they did, for example, was they offered free meals to healthcare workers. I'll try and show you that campaign and see if the video will work. If not, maybe we can send the links later on to everyone so you guys can watch them on your own.
There were times when the front line put you next for the slide. A mask was just for play. And 6 feet was an impossible length to grow. Thank you to all the first responders and healthcare workers. We're proud to be a part of your lives and see what you grew into. And through May 5th, we'll be proudly feeding you thank you meals for free. It's our honor to serve you.
So that's a great example of what brands can be doing, you know, during this period. They're offering free meals for healthcare workers. So, you know, I think it's something that will be remembered beyond this. Okay, we saw Mercedes-Benz do a couple of cute things on Twitter, Coca-Cola as well, with the separation of the logos. So different brands did different things, but I think that, you know, the ones that really win are the ones that do something that is good, that solves a problem. And that doesn't necessarily expect people to come and respond or buy something. And I think one of the best examples for me, you know, was, so there's another campaign very quickly that we did for one of our clients here. And it was basically a campaign to spread this very simple message of "Af'alna النهاردة هتجمعنا بكرة." Let's do the right thing today, and tomorrow we'll be back together. And this was done with the Ministry of Health as a joint campaign, just to communicate during this time. But I think what I was saying, one of my favorites, I think that the winner for me was, this is the Four Seasons in New York, that basically turned their hotel into a dorm room for hospital workers that had to isolate from their families. Okay, now that is brilliant, right? That is just literally jumping in, solving a problem, and not necessarily expecting anything in return. And these are the things that will be remembered when this crisis is over, all right? So what happens next? What happens as we phase out of this crisis, or even as we move into different, you know, a different part of the crisis? How will this crisis impact your growth strategies and the value that you provide your customers, right? All of these things now are being challenged. How do we remain relevant? All right, so let's talk about that for a second. So we know that this crisis will end, all right? And I got this meme the other day on WhatsApp. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But we know that this will end at some point, right? Whether it's going to be another month or 2 or 6, maybe beyond, I don't know. But it will be, at some point, this will be behind us. And we know that there will be some kind of a recovery, right? You know, there's not much agreement on what kind of recovery it will be. A lot of people are saying, you know, a U recovery or a W recovery or any other letters of the alphabet, but we're not sure. But we know there will be some kind of a recovery. And we also know that people have short memories, right? I anticipate that many of us who are trying to do the namaste Japanese greetings or fist bumps or elbow bumps or all of these things, I imagine many of us will go back to shaking hands a lot sooner than we expect. So we know that purchasing power and sentiment and behavior will change, right? There's no question about that. We will not be seeing concerts of 5,000 people anytime soon. People won't be running back to movie theaters. So a lot of this stuff will be changing quite dramatically, right? And we have to make sure that we're adjusting to that. And you know, even where sentiment isn't changing, purchasing power will drive different behavior patterns. Consumers will behave differently simply because they don't have as much money, right? If everyone's earnings, you know, are being impacted, this will impact what they can buy. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And this is a really important bit here, guys, because oftentimes when we talk about brands, we don't talk about values. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had within our organizations. Brand values will be under scrutiny in this coming period. And we see it. We see, companies like Airbnb and Kareem, when they're laying off people, the memos that the CEOs are writing to the staff are circulating, right? And this is internal communication that is being leaked outwards intentionally or unintentionally, but it ultimately is going to impact how people think about these brands. So how you behave is going to be a test of your values, right? And that means whether you have to lay people off or how you deal with your customers, or if you're sitting on money and not paying your suppliers, right? I'm not sure that's going to be something that is going to really help you forward when your values become under scrutiny. Okay. And we know that there will be opportunity. Mark Cuban was talking recently about how this is the time that you should start a new business, right? If you can find a business that's on that left-hand side, right? Online, essential, and low physical contact, maybe this is something where there's an opportunity right now that you can seize. So it's important to look for those opportunities. And the way that we do this is that your brand map is what will help you to find your way. And the brand map is something that we developed to really help us and our clients to understand, what does it mean? What does building a strong brand really mean? And we dissected most of the brands that we really admire into three primary categories or primary elements, okay? And these elements are basically meaning. And the meaning of a brand goes back to those values. It goes back to that purpose of a brand. So, right, it's the core ideologies of a brand, the things that a brand believes fundamentally, right? And that's a very important place to start, okay? The second part is the attitude of the brand. And this is what we currently consider to be, branding in inverted commas, right? So the attitude is the look and the feel and the colors and the logo and the tone of voice and all of the things that you see from afar when you look at a brand. And then finally, we look at the promise. And the promise of the brand is basically, what is the experience that this brand is providing to its consumers, to its customers, and indeed to its employees. So employee experience is a big part of what we talk about, because that's a fundamental area of brand strength, okay? And why does this work so well for us? Because if you look at human beings, we are designed in the same way, right? So each of us has our meaning, we have our values, our beliefs, things that are important to us. We have our attitudes, which is the way that we speak and we dress and we talk and so on, and we appear to others. And then finally, we have the way that we treat people, right? So if we're doing really well on 1 and 2, fantastic meaning, great attitude, but, we're not making people feel good, or we're treating people unkindly, that's going to impact our brand as individuals. And it's the same thing for companies. All right. So this is a very simplistic way of looking at it. The actual model is a bit more complex, and includes a lot of different things that we kind of go through. But, the basic thing goes back to those three things. Okay. So think about your own brand, discuss it, internally. What is our meaning? Is it well defined? Do we all agree with it? Is everyone aligned behind it? Same thing with attitude. And then promise is really where you should be spending most of your time, right? Before, when you could advertise your way out of problems, your investment went into advertising, right? You can't do that anymore. The skip ad button, on Google has changed that. You can no longer advertise your way out of problems. So you need to talk about the experience. And that's where the investment should be made. You should be investing in making your experience, both for your employees, for your talent, and for your customers, really, really remarkable. Okay, we're doing well on time. So this is something I want to leave you with, which is a post-corona brand checklist. And it's just 12 points that come under the 3 areas of our brand map. The first thing is go back and revisit your core purpose, right? why do you exist? Why does your company exist? Why, if you disappear tomorrow, what will people miss, right? And if the answer is nothing, then you really need to go back and think about that and say, you know, how sustainable is my business model? How sustainable is my company or my culture if I don't have a core purpose that people can rally around? You know, the Japanese, they call it ikigai, which I think is a great word, because ikigai literally means the reason you wake up in the morning, or the reason to get out of bed, or something like that. It's very, very specific. Find your ikigai. Redesign your value proposition, right? If your value proposition is on the right side of that chart where everything is offline and a lot of physical contact and big crowds and non-essential, you know, is that proposition still relevant today, right? How can you redesign your value proposition so it's more relevant and resilient as well, right? So it will withstand this crisis and future crises. So I can't underscore this enough. Build empathy into your values. Build empathy into your values. You know, it's just, this is a time where we need to care for one another. We need to care for ourselves. We need to care for our employees. And everything that we do, I think at this time, needs to really be empathy should be one of those values that exists. I think in the past few years, you talk about any company's values and they always have integrity, right? And you think that that's a given, right? I mean, integrity is a given. I think from now on, empathy should be that one value that's on everybody's wall, and it shouldn't be a given, right? It should be definitely something that everyone strives towards. Get close to your core customers, right? Make sure that you redesign your offering around what they want, right? Around their lives, around, you know, how things are affecting them, right? It's a really important thing to get close to your customers now. And then an attitude. This is, you know, be positive, right? Try to keep your messages and your messaging lighthearted, make it supportive, right? It's a really important part, something to consider in the way you're communicating, okay? And be sensitive. Remember that many are truly suffering through this crisis. You know, when we first did the stay-at-home, the stay-at-home campaigns, you know, we were really worried because some people can't stay at home. You know, some people don't have the luxury of staying at home and working from Zoom, and some people had to, you know, leave their houses and leave their homes and risk their lives and their health in order to actually work. So be sensitive when you're communicating and be honest. I think, you know, this is so important for us to remember. Be honest, it will be appreciated. People want to hear, you know, honesty these days. So don't speak in your BC voice. Don't speak in your before Corona voice, right? If your messaging is the same as it was in December, in June, then you're probably tone deaf and you need to reconsider that, right? People do not want to hear what they were hearing in December, in May, June, July. They want to hear a new message with a lot more empathy, a lot more honesty, a lot more relevance. And then finally, we have promise. And the first thing about promise is, you know, give help and support your customers, and not just your customers, support everybody. You know, I was listening to a very interesting talk earlier this month, and the person that was speaking said, you know, philanthropy should be anti-cyclical, right? So people who are still able to give today and to help today should be giving a lot more than they were in 2019, right? So, you know, give help, support your customers and otherwise. Kindness is memorable. People will remember kindness when this is over. Think about what moments in your customers or people's lives that you're improving, right? This is really important. There's a lot of very cool stuff that's being done by companies to soothe some of the pains that people are going through, and just to make things more convenient. You know, just simple stuff like people sending, you know, kits that help you bake bread at home. I mean, there's some great examples in this market. You know, companies like, there's a great brand of fatira called Fatira that's sending bake at home kits. I think TBS is doing the same thing. You know, there's a couple of these brands that are out there that are doing just simple stuff to make, you know, people's lives a little bit better. So this is a big discussion. We could do a full webinar on media, but I think, where you're advertising is really interesting and really important to be discussed right now. If digital obviously is winning these days, but digital is a very broad list of options. There's a big long menu of digital options. Which one is going to help you to meet your customers where you want to meet them? Okay, and finally, in the middle of all this, don't forget your employee experience. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of companies that are doing really great stuff around this, but I'm seeing others that are neglecting their employee experience. And I think if you're in an industry where talent is, and I happen to be in an industry like that, talent is very important and it's very competitive to attract and retain talent. Your employee experience is going to be a fundamental part of your strategy going forward. All right. So that's basically the brand checklist. I wanted to leave you with something to go back to the office and think about. So it's not just a chat. And I think we're doing well for time. We have about 20 minutes for questions. May?
Yes, we have a question from Mr. Muhammad Abdelmenaim. How do you expand your brand recognition during the pandemic without pushing anything on customers or small business that is not widely known?
That's a great question, Muhammad. Thank you. I think it's everything we just talked about. Don't be silent. Don't be one of the most interesting things that I've observed in my career is that sometimes brands just go silent or they go a bit silent, and that impacts them. If we look at the results after the 2008 financial crisis, brands that came into that crisis and continued to invest and continued to communicate did remarkably better after the crisis than other brands. And we're talking about factors of 8, 9, and 10 in terms of growth relative to other brands. So I think this is a time for brands to not be silent. And the nice thing is, not everything has to cost a lot of money. You can do a lot of things in communication where you're not investing too much, but you're creating salience. You are keeping your name out there. You're gaining mind space, which is really important. I hope that answers the question, but definitely just don't be silent. Go out there and make sure that your message is being heard, your brand is being known, even now. Just don't be opportunistic. I think that's the one thing that I would say is that seek opportunity without being opportunistic, right?
Okay, we have another question. Does your approach to brand shift depending on where on the spectrum your business sits versus Corona, for example, growth or... It's from T. El-Amari. Mr. T. El-Amari, if I didn't say your question well, can you please raise your hand so I can unmute you?
Could you, if you could unmute him and have him turn his video on, it would be great for us to see Mr. T. El-Amari.
I'll try to find his name and then I will unmute him.
Yeah, the name sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I have another question. If you have to launch a new product not related to Corona needs, what we must take care about?
So you can launch new brands now. You can launch new products now. I think you need to just try to be sensitive in your message. Make sure that your message is crafted in a way that it is not, again, opportunistic. I mean, the reality is that people need to sell, right? So they can pay their employee salaries and they can, so people have an understanding that commerce will continue and needs to continue. So, if your product is not related to Corona, then go out and create a campaign, create a messaging to promote it. Just make sure that you're being sensitive to what we talked about, with the crisis. That's all. So I'm not saying that you should not communicate anything other than crisis-related stuff, but make sure that you're being sensitive and not missing, you know, an opportunity to do something maybe good in this new launch.
Okay, we have Mr. Bishoy. He wants to ask a question.
Sure. Can you unmute and have him
Yeah,
ask
I
the
did.
question?
I did.
Oh, great.
Hey, can you hear me well?
Tamam.
Great. So I wanted to ask you a question about brands that are of essential needs. So there are some brands that are typically by nature still an essential need for people. So what kind of messaging or tone should this kind of brand have in order to still be compassionate, still be willing to still go the extra mile, even though those brands and the owners of those brands know that they are always in need? So what's your take on that?
So that's a really good question, and I think it's again, it's straightforward. You know, when you're manufacturing something that is deemed as essential right now, there are a few things that you want to avoid, right? You want to avoid, don't gouge on pricing, right? Make sure you don't raise your prices now because people find your product essential. You know, I would continue to communicate. I would continue to tell people that you're here. Keep your message consistent. Let people know that you're available and you're producing, and that and definitely make sure that you're not, you know, if this is something that is essential that you can offer to the healthcare community, maybe I would offer it to them either as donations or as a discounted product, but definitely offer it. Continue to be out there, continue to drive your product through the channels. And I think that you know, that should be really enough, but definitely don't be opportunistic. Don't raise your prices. I know that's tempting. A lot of companies are very tempted by that. But yeah, long-term, bad idea.
Okay, another question. Do you expect the market share of generics will expand because of expected financial pressure over consumers? Omar?
I think, yeah, I'm just thinking. Some of these questions actually need me to think, so it's you have to give me a second. I think there's no question that this is a period where price will be important to everybody. So anything that's priced lower will have a competitive advantage. But generics, by definition, are non-branded, right? So that's not a very sustainable strategy, because you know, you're going to find yourself when this crisis is over with nothing to stand on but the fact that you were the cheapest in the market. And I think unless if you're going to be the cheapest in the market, you know, if your price is going to be the lowest, your costs have to be the lowest. So unless you're the cost leader, you know, in toilet paper, unless you can produce the cheapest toilet paper, you know, in the market, then, you know, a pricing strategy that puts you at the bottom of the market price-wise will not be sustainable, right? So, you know, I think generics will definitely have a moment where they're in demand, but as we move out of the crisis, I think brands that have connected to people emotionally and that have made, you know, made the right moves during the crisis, I think will be in better shape.
Okay. How the definition of luxurious would change after the crisis, or will it just be something from the past?
So I wish I could tell you that we will stop buying $2,000 handbags. You know, I wish that were the case. I think there's no question that people are going to be rethinking the way they spend money, right? I think the fact that we had a moment, or we still have a moment right now in our lives where we're thinking to ourselves, you know, that extra 500 or 1,000 or whatever number it is pounds could have helped us, but I spent it on nonsense. And I think, you know, discretionary spending is going to change, right? But there will always be people, you know, that can afford to spend without discretion, and that's it's going to be a smaller market, I think, going forward. But I think the way luxury is defined will change, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of things that are offering comfort in our lives and offering, you know, I was thinking this morning that, you know, I think, you know, yoga instruction and wellness products and wellness is going to be such a big sector going forward. right? Because we're going to want to connect in a way that's different, and maybe connect with ourselves in a way that's different. So I think maybe these will be some of the new luxuries, as it were, right? But will we continue to buy $2,000 handbags? I don't know. I wish, you know, I wish the answer was no, but I think we will continue to do that.
Okay.
Sorry if there's any people out there selling expensive handbags. I don't mean to target you.
Which approach do you think organizations like restaurant and food and beverage should take care with their customers after reopening?
So you have to think about what is the job that restaurants are doing, right? So restaurants are doing a lot of different jobs, and some of the jobs they can't do right now, right? So the idea of being a place where people go to get together and to gather with people, either strangers or friends or family, and be in a certain environment, that's not being done anymore. You can't do that anymore. But so now you're really doing two things. You're delivering something to be eaten, right? Either you're delivering food or you're delivering, I heard this morning, one of the restaurants in M.A.P was actually delivering raw burgers that you could grill at home, and they send you the bread and everything else, and fantastic. So you're either delivering something to be eaten, or you're delivering a certain emotional benefit, as it were, right? So there's a certain emotional benefit that goes along with eating sushi, right? We all know that many people at least didn't start off eating sushi because it tasted great, right? But there's a certain emotional benefit and a self-expressive benefit that goes along with the fact that I eat sushi, and then we all started liking it because we ate it so much. But initially, so the answer to your question is, how can you continue to do those two things really, really well, right? So how can you continue to provide food and provide an emotional benefit to your customer, even if they're not necessarily coming to your location? And if you look around, you're going to see a lot of brands that are doing exactly that right now. They're communicating in a way that's emotional. They're connecting to their consumers. They are making sure that whatever they can do to transport their experience, they're doing it, right? You know, hopefully this will change. I think one of the things that's important for some of these restaurants is the idea of virtual kitchens, right? Or virtual brands, if you will, right? You don't need necessarily a location, you know, with seating space right now to be able to do what you're doing. You can do this from a less expensive kitchen, and these kitchens can be shared by a number of different brands as well. So there's a lot of things that this industry can do. I'm not sure how well everything will turn out for the restaurant industry, but there's a lot of things that can be done now. And again, the brands that act and communicate and connect are the ones that are going to come out of this stronger.
Okay, we have a raised hand for Mr. Muhammad Inawi. I'll unmute you.
Hello, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, basically my question is, could the M.A.P shape survive within the different recovery scenarios of the W shape, M shape, and L shape, and all of that scenario, or there will be a need for a different shape to be developed after the pandemic?
I'm sorry, Muhammad, the shape of what?
The M.A.P shape, the meaning, the attitude, and the promise, the shape of the brand itself. So
no. I think that the M.A.P model will continue to be the same. I think it will not change, but I think the elements within it might change, right?
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So not every piece of the puzzle will remain the same, but they will all fall under those three primary elements.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a raised hand from Mr. G. Hikal. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Omar. How are you?
Hello.
How's everything? I can see you're writing Hikal with just an I without an A.
It's a long story. I can tell it to you later, but it's
yeah. I know. It's a long debate in the family. So what I want to actually ask, I want to have any research or insight about the most effective channel during the pandemic. Which social channel was the most effective for the Egyptian market, at least?
So that's an answer that would require data that I don't actually have right now. But we can take some guesses, right? Because that's fun. I mean, I would guess that Instagram has done really well for brands during this period. I would guess, obviously, Facebook for some brands and some segments has done really well. You know, but I think digital has to be looked at beyond social, right? You can't just look at Instagram and Facebook as the entirety of digital. I think digital is expanding, and there's a lot of things that you could do that are beyond just social media. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. So I don't have the exact data on which channels have been most effective, but I know there's a lot of very good resources out there that can help you to determine that.
Okay. Do you think that with priorities shifting to more basic needs over the long run, do you believe brands will still play a role on your choices, or will consumers just focus more on the utility of the product or service they receive?
Who asked that question? Sorry.
Hassan Shukri.
I don't know, Hassan. What's happening in your consumption habits, right? So, do you feel that if everything were offered to you in a generic package, would that be okay? I think that brands have become such an important part of our lives that everything is. I mean, what isn't branded today, right? I mean, water is branded, right? Steel rebars are branded. One of the most generic, industries. Steel rebars are branded. Oxygen in some places is branded. So I think the idea of brands disappearing is far-fetched, but I think that there will be a period that we're going to go through that people will be under pressure to look for value, right? And value doesn't necessarily mean just money. So if your brand is offering enough, a value above just the functional, right? And we talked about that earlier, emotional benefits, self-expressive benefits. We want to feel good about ourselves, and brands that are well designed make you feel good about yourself. So I think designing brands with that in mind is really important.
Mr. Til Amari is here. He wants to ask a question.
Yep, the troublemaker.
Please. The troublemaker. Dr. Omar, great session, and I would expect nothing less. Question for you about your spectrum that covered growth, ouch, a number of different other areas. In this era now, how would companies, and they would differ across that spectrum, think about redefining their brand and working internally to do that, and working with organizations such as yourselves and others in the space to rethink about the brand going forward?
Okay, great. That's a great question. Thanks, Mr. El Amri. So I think a big part of what we do is exactly what you mentioned, right? So we the idea is strategy is about really figuring out ways to solve certain problems, and designing your offering, designing your brand to address the challenges. And it kind of goes without saying that if you're over here on the right hand side, where you are in a very high touch, big crowds, government restricted space, and incidentally, those industries also happen to be very capital intensive, right? So airlines, travel and tourism, a lot of industries that have very, very high, they're very capital intensive. So a lot of times they're going to need to do an interesting pivot, right? One of the things we're doing with some of our clients right now is if you're in the professional services industry, right? It doesn't really matter where you are on that spectrum, but what matters is where your clients are. So if you've been targeting people over here on the orange and right side, then how can you, redesign your offering and redesign your brand so that you can begin to target people on the left-hand side of that spectrum? So I think it's important. We're looking at companies are doing one of three things, right? They're either pivoting, And the ones that are pivoting are the ones that are over there in the orange and red. They're doubling down, right? Some of the companies that are over there that are on the left-hand side in the blue and green, they're doubling down on what they're doing, and they're really kind of investing more and pushing forward. Or they are basically focusing, which means they're taking one part of their offering and paying more attention and investing more in that particular part of their offering, because that's where the relevance is. So yeah, it's a discussion that we definitely have, and we're doing that with many of our clients right now. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we have only 1 minute left. We have a raised hand from Mrs. Alia Farouk. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Alia.
Hi, Omar. So I have a question. So basically what you're saying is we should always believe that this is going to be over. However, we have to change how we communicate post-corona. However, sometimes right now, even when we're still during this phase, we feel like we don't want to constantly keep hammering on it, because people might reach a point where they're tired. They don't want to hear anymore, like, stay home, take care. Sometimes we feel like we just want to avoid it altogether because people have already heard it over and over again, and we don't really know, like, should we always mention it? Should we not? Should we be like, sometimes yes, sometimes no? Because the thing is that really, even me as a consumer, I've grown so tired of it. Like, everybody is talking about it. So we don't want to be also one of those brands who keep nagging and pushing these buttons that people no longer want to talk about. So what's your take on that? Should we just avoid it and pretend like it's not happening, or should we sway with the idea very subtly, or what should we really do?
It's a cool question, and the reason I say it because it takes a lot of nuance, right? It takes a lot of nuance to understand. So the first answer to the first question is, should we always mention it? Absolutely not, right? Unless you are, no brand should be constantly mentioning the crisis, right? That's just tiresome and silly. So definitely not. Can you ignore it? Again, I would say no. So I think you need to be somewhere where you are always aware of, and this really is the same as even beyond the crisis. Be aware of the mood of your consumer. Be aware of the mood in the market. Be aware of what people are thinking about, so you can make messaging that's relevant to them. Definitely don't just ignore it, and don't mention it every day, right? So you have to design messaging that is nuanced enough to say, okay, we know this is happening. Even if you don't say it, it's in the background there. We know this is happening, but here's something else we want to talk about, right? We're going to talk about, something else completely within the context of the fact that there's this crisis that we know is all happening around us, right?
Okay. Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent.
Okay, we have one last question. How to deliver the P promise part of M.A.P, because people became more hesitated?
I'm not sure what that question means. Can you, whoever answered the question, can you clarify a bit what that means?
Mr.
How are they
GIDFN.
How are they hesitating?
Okay, I'll mute him.
So let me just explain what the P part of the M.A.P is, because maybe that's where the confusion is. The promise of every brand is really where it lives or dies. Okay, we spend so much time talking about elements of the brand, and we ignore the experience, and the experience of the customers, and indeed the experience of the employees, is really where we should be focusing a lot of our time and efforts and innovation and thinking, right? Because that's where brands are built, right? If you have a great ad campaign and people come to your restaurant and your food is horrible, or your bathrooms are dirty, or your service is bad, it doesn't matter what else you do, right? You have bad service or you have bad food. And that applies to every, think about the telecoms companies, you've dealt with some fantastic brands, great ads, but then you use them, and either you love them and you say, great, I'm reinforced, this brand is fantastic, or you have a horrible experience and you hate the brand. It doesn't matter, what they do otherwise. So the promise for the brand is all about the experience, and we should be investing a lot of time and effort in that section.
Okay, we have a raised hand, and this will be the last one, really. Yeah? Mr. Hassan Al-Arousi.
أهلا وسهلا.
Hi, Mr. Omar, how are you?
بطل مصر. ازيك؟
Alhamdulillah. I've sent them a question, but I guess Maro did not. Anyways, I'm just talking, Mr. Omar, regarding the business of sports in general in Egypt after the post-corona phase. How do you see the impact on big and small brands in Egypt regarding clubs, facilities, events in general? Where do you see all these the brands going after the corona phase regarding the sports industry?
So I think that the sports brands need to go through a phase of a transition period, right? So in most cases, sports are about gatherings, and they're about crowds, and they're about big, events that are large, or clubs where people are. So that's not going to happen maybe for a while, but there needs to be a very clear plan for sporting brands, how to help people transition out of that. But what I can tell you is I think that people have been locked at home for a while, and there's going to be a big demand. There's a latent demand for people to go out and be active and learn new sports and maybe, try new things. And that's a great opportunity for the sporting industry, I think. But there has to be this transition of how do we move from, curfew, lockdown, restrictions to, maybe even more restrictions in the next few months, and then to transition out of that to our new normal, inshallah, afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, maybe.
Okay. I think that's all. We cannot take any more questions.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Very much. Thank you.